This year was telling myself I'm not going to say anything bad about Christmas. I'm just not going to do it. A lot of times there's guff surrounding it. A lot of times people misunderstand. And you might as well just talk about the sweet baby Jesus, because you're not going to make a difference in anybody's life spiritually, eternally, and the like. But I went by my neighbor's, and he had some nice yard deer out there. And they're cute little things. I don't know where he got them, and should have been left alone. But he took a drill and drilled into the nose of the first one. And he put not just a little Christmas red light bulb in it, but one of those big pointed things. And there's such an incongruity there with that big red nose on that little yard deer that I thought, that's it, that's the last straw. I'm going to have to make a comment on Christmas again. Now, the title then of this series is Christmas Images and Incantations. As Skip Yoakum here just a few minutes ago very adequately put it, we all have thoughts and memories of how Christmas was when we were younger and how things changed, and especially as we have become Christians. But with this particular message, we're going to delve into the depths just a little deeper with regard to the background of Christmas. Now, I want you to know that I am not a Scrooge. I always have to preface my remarks with these things. I too have fond memories of Christmas like you. But I wish now I would have had a Christian family. I wish now that I would have spent those years, because up to this point, things were wasted back then. Oh, I had good times, but money can buy fun times. You can have fun times hanging out with the gang, and that's pretty much all it was. It's just a national social gathering where everybody gets together around the tree, opens presents, and eats. But I too like Christmas. I like the lights and the so-called season. So I'm not a Scrooge. However, the word Scrooge, in my opinion, is just like old fogey and so forth, that the world has as a scare tactic, something used as a term of intimidation. And it has its tactics. For example, I saw the movie A Perfect World, with Kevin Costner and Clint Eastwood. Now, this guy kidnapped a kid and held him as hostage, and the kid said, "I've never celebrated Halloween." And here's Kevin Costner, who is a criminal. He said, "You mean your mother would never?" Yeah, and the mom was made out to be some religious fanatic, which is another term that is used, that wouldn't allow her little sweet little boy to celebrate Halloween. And the message that was given over is that anybody who doesn't let their children celebrate Halloween is an old fogey, a religious fanatic, doesn't have half a brain, doesn't understand, and so forth. Now, the young lad stole a Halloween costume, and you know what it was? Casper the Friendly Ghost. Now, Leviticus 20, verse 27. A man also, or a woman, that has a familiar or a friendly spirit. What does the world do? The world doesn't understand that seducing spirits can control cartoonists and make them draw friendly spirits, so that we think that it's okay to contact familiar or friendly spirits. He wore a friendly spirit. He and the spirit were one in the costume, as the spirit and others are one in demon possession. See, they don't realize that. So they make fun of those of us who would say, now, wait one second. If you want to celebrate Halloween, okay, maybe they can be a clown or a hobo and so forth, but don't let them say trick or treat. That is intimidation. And don't let them be a witch or have a familiar spirit. Why? Because God's word condemns it. And it would be better for them not to celebrate Halloween than for them to celebrate it and get in trouble with God. Now, it says, they shall surely be put to death. Let's turn to the book of Exodus, chapter 20. Now, as I am prefacing these remarks here about images and incantations, we're talking about the fact of not just preserving our own spirituality, but teaching our children correctly. There is a warning that we have read countless times about perverting this idea of religious holy days. For example, verse 3, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Don't make any graven image or likeness of anything in heaven above, earth beneath, water under the earth. Don't bow down to them or serve them, for I'm a jealous God. Now here's what God does. He visits the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation. That's why anytime you have something religious connected or connoted to a holy day, to a holiday is what we call it, you've got to take a second look, because you may be, in effect, practicing yourself and teaching your children to practice something that eventually is going to net for them God's wrath. And I've told you this before. I've had my own relatives to make a big to-do about Santa on Christmas, and raise, and what my opinion is, sweet little idolaters. And then all of a sudden, the first of the year, those sweet little idolaters get sick. And then it's, oh, Pastor, you're in the family. You've got an 800 number. Would you please pray for this little one? And I want to say, why don't you pray to Santa? Why don't you ask him to heal your little one? You make such a big to-do of him. He's able to do, and he put his, finger to his nose and perform magic. Why don't you just pray to him? Why is God important now, but during Christmas God is left out, and the image of Mr. Claus is forthcoming? Now, I don't say that simply because I want an opportunity to witness and so forth to unsaved people, but my tongue is a little raw because we raise these idolaters, and God sends a little judgment to these idolaters, and then we say, oh God, take away the judgment. Take away St. Nick. Maybe he'll take away the judgment. Did you ever think if you remove the idol and put the true God where he belongs, that the true God might preserve and protect and bless you in this joyous Christmas season? Well, that's what is happening here. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 23. Take heed unto yourselves, lest you forget the covenant of your God that he made with you, and make graven image or likeness of anything which the Lord has forbidden you. This is Deuteronomy 4, now verse 24. For I'm a jealous God. Verse 25. When you beget children and children's children, and you remain long in the land, and you corrupt yourself, and make a graven image or likeness of anything, you provoke him to anger. Verse 26, I call heaven and earth to witness against you this day, that you'll soon utterly perish. Now, here is one of the reasons that I focus in on those things. Santa is not like Barney. Santa is not like Lamb Chop. Santa is not like Big Bird. All of those are fictional characters, but there is no religious connotation connected to those. And so I say, fine. I like Lamb Chop myself. Barney, sometimes he's a little too sweet for my taste, but I like Lamb Chop and her friends. They're pretty real. But Barney, now he's growing on me. I'm beginning to like him a little more, and so forth. But the minute you put God in there, the minute you associate a certain day and practice with God, you have to be careful, because it can be tantamount to idolatry. And we do not want to teach our children that. Let's go to chapter 11 in Deuteronomy. Another warning. Now, I purposely started off this lesson with all these warnings. And you're going to say, these in the Old Testament. Yes, but I'm going to take you right to the Apostle Paul, where he said these were written for our warning, that we wouldn't be idolaters as they were idolaters. We'll see that in a moment. Take heed to yourselves and to your heart. Don't be deceived, that you turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. Then the Lord's wrath be kindled against you, and he shut up heaven. Now there's an interesting thing, because we're in Deuteronomy 11. I'm sorry. Deuteronomy 11 and verse 16. We'll back up. Take heed to yourselves that your heart be not deceived, that you turn aside and serve other gods and worship them. The Lord's wrath be kindled against you, and he shut up heaven. There's no rain in the land, it won't yield her fruit, and you quickly perish from off the good land. Now, just want to stop right here and make a comment. In a little bit, it won't be this hour, we're going to talk about the incantations of Christmas. What is an incantation? Well, I'll define it in just a bit, but actually, it has to do with pronouncing magical words, either for yourself or someone else, that some mystical force somewhere, some being somewhere is going to bless you at a certain time with certain specific blessings. For example, Merry Christmas or Merry Christ Mass is an incantation. Now, before anybody says, oh, goodness, Pastor, you're taking away my Merry Christmases too. No, I'm afraid for convention's sake, we're going to still have to use the word Christmas, and you and I are just going to have to understand. But God says, when you go after idols, I'm shutting up heaven with regard to blessing. I mean, the faucets are shut, the windows are closed, and the doors are locked. No blessings getting out of here for anybody who goes after idols and other gods. When we say Merry Christmas or blessings on you, happy holidays, we're in effect pronouncing an incantation for God to bless this person, apart from the fact that they're worthy of blessing. Do they deserve it? No. Are they Christ rejectors? Yes. Does God bless Christ rejectors? No. Well, what in the world does somebody who rejects the baby as Lord have to do with us saying, well, I hope you get some real good blessings this year? See, God shuts up heaven for idolaters. And when you switch the true meaning of Christmas for the false meaning, when you put the image of Santa for the image of Jesus Christ, you are in effect with your words, well-wishing, saying, well, I hope God blesses you despite the fact that you are a Christ rejecter. So it's a serious business. And one of the points of my ministry, I am here not to be a thorn in your flesh, but to make you think. We glibly do what the world does with regard to these things, and we don't think, why do they do that? They do that because they want to be a Christ rejecter and still have the best of this world. But isn't that the definition of evil? The best of this life apart from God? That's why they have their incantations. Now, we'll get to incantations in just a little bit. Therefore, verse 18, you'll lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul. Bind them as a sign in your hand and the frontlets between your eyes. And you'll teach them to your children when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down. You'll write them upon your house and on your gates, that your days might be multiplied and the days of your children. I saw one of the singers, perhaps a blessed virgin, Mariah Carey, saying after she sings all of her secular songs that woo people sexually, I came out with a Christmas album, and I'm going to donate the proceeds to children We're concerned about the children. Well, isn't it nice that during a few weeks out of the year, especially if it means money in her pocket, she is going to care about the children. But for the rest of the year, what does she want the children to do? Buy her records so that she can have a lot of money. She's concerned about the children. I'm concerned about the children. What are they being taught? What are they hearing? Verse 26. Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of the Lord, and a curse, verse 28, if you will not obey the commandments of the Lord, which I commanded you this day to go after other gods which ye have not known. Now I call this Project Y, or Operation Y. In every moment of every day in our lives, we come to what Johnny Carson used to call the fork in the road, if you've ever seen that skit of his. When I was unsaved, I used to watch a lot of Johnny, and he would call it the fork in the road. But you come to a blessing and a cursing. You can choose which direction you're going to go. Now, one of the reasons that you need to choose correctly is just what it says there in verse 19, to teach them to your children. If you don't know, you can't tell them. And to the third and fourth generation, God says, I'm fed up, and he sends just a little bit of judgment. Chapter 32. Chapter 32 and verse 46. And he said unto them, set your hearts unto all the words which I testify among you this day, which ye shall command your children to observe and do, all the words of this law. All right? Two more portions, 1 Kings chapter 9. 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. Now this is going to be a real test of your ability to find scriptures, because we're going to have a whole lot of them. 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 6. But if ye shall at all turn from following me, ye or your children, and will not meet my commandments, which I have set before you, but go and worship other gods and serve them, then I will cut off Israel from out of the land. Why? Verse 9, because they forsook the Lord their God, middle part of the verse, have taken hold of other gods, worship them and serve them. Therefore has the Lord brought upon them all this evil. The moment you associate a special day with God, you have to be careful about how you practice, what you observe, how you observe the things during that special day. Otherwise, it can become idolatry. Let's go to one more portion before we define some things. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Now, almost everything that I've given you was in the Old Testament. But the reason that I do that, the images and incantations of Christmas actually have their root all the way back to Babylon. And the reason that Israel faced them with all the variety of and aspects of the same things is because God took the religion of Babylon, he scattered the people, he changed their languages so that they have the same gods with the same practices, but just they call it a different thing. Okay? Now, verse 6. Israel was always tempted to go after the gods of the peoples round about them, whether it was the gods of Egypt, the Canaanites, the Babylonians. These were our examples, says verse 6. To the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted, neither be ye idolaters as some of them were. That's verse 7. So, we said all that to say this. There is a true meaning of Christmas. There is an appropriate celebration of Christmas. We are not Scrooges. We're not fanatics. We're not some Scrooge who is a crotchety old man who will not fork over the money to allow somebody the joy of celebrating Christmas. We're nothing like that. We can enjoy, to a point, the so-called celebration. But we have to also understand some things. That's what we're going to do right now in giving some definitions. It's interesting that Skip used the word festive in his good thoughts during our Sunday school opening. Because Christmas is supposed to be festive. People are supposed to be happy. I've heard it 1,000 times already. I have gotten into the spirit of Christmas. I'm happy. I'm no longer a Scrooge. I've released some of my money. I've not been tight-fisted and so forth. But festive actually means pertaining to or appropriate for a feast or a holiday. Now, it's interesting that the Roman feast of Saturnalia and what they called Kalends also did the very same thing that people do at Christmas time. Collect food and give it to the poor. No one went hungry. They also had feasts and orgies and good family times together. Everybody get together and they would celebrate. Only the Saturnalia had to do with the winter solstice. And they were celebrating and so forth so that their sun god would reach a point where he would no longer go that direction from the earth, taking his warmth and thereby life, and he would start coming toward the earth, turning everything green again so that they could have their crops and harvests and food. Now, what happened was the Roman Empire began marching all around the world, and they had a policy of what's called amalgamation and assimilation. They would come into a town and they would say, oh, you're this type of religion, huh? Yeah, well, we'll just make that part of us. And so they had all kind of deities, all kind of religion. Roman Catholic Church came by, influenced the Roman Empire and said, your gods are our gods. We'll just Christianize them. And that's how Christmas actually came about. We'll see that in a moment. So the festivities are appropriate for a holiday. And a holiday can mean simply a day of rest, an off time. But when it's connected to a religious observance, what do you call it? You call it a holy day. And that changes the perspective of Christmas. Why? Simply because if you're going to have a holy day, what or who do you have to observe a holy day? Holy people, don't you? Had lunch, and as I was sitting there was some inebriated fellow that came in, and I mean, he was celebrating early, and he was soused. He said some of the most obnoxious, uncouth, unkind things, and when he left, he said, Merry Christmas. What am I saying? To celebrate a holy day, you have to have holy people. And to have a national observance presumes that America is holy. And I tell you, we're so far from it, you wouldn't recognize holiness. What is an image? An image is any representation, counterpart, likeness of any person or thing used for two things. One, either mediating on your behalf. In other words, you talk to it, you pray to it, you admire it, you honor it in order to get it or that person to do something on your behalf, or you adore it as a god. So, mediating on one's behalf or adoring as God. It's anything like that. All right? Now, the last thing that we want to look at here by way of definition is the word incantation. It is my contention that much of what we say at Christmas is nothing more than an incantation that comes from paganism or from Catholicism. What is an incantation? You speak certain words in a certain way that presents for you a magical formula. Now, it's for the purpose of raising spirits in a twofold way. You want to make the other person happy. You're interested in them. So you say, Merry Christmas. You want to raise their spirits. You want them to have a good time. You want them to get all that they want for Christmas. Now, the problem is, yes, there is a sense in which this can be a social courtesy. It's just simply like saying, have a good day, a happy birthday. All of those things are social courtesies where we really care about people and we say, we hope you have a good day. But the minute you add religion to it, you are involving God in what you say. It's like saying, God bless you. You hear that all the time, especially by religionists. Well, do you have some in with God where you're simply going to call down God's blessings on the other person? What if they don't deserve it? What if they're out of fellowship? What if they're unsaved and at that moment they're hardening their heart against God the Holy Spirit, a Christ rejecter of the greatest magnitude, and you're calling down God's blessings? Boy, are you presumptuous. You're arrogant. You have no right to do that. But yet, that's what we do. So we have to be careful about how we word things. Also, an incantation is saying something for beneficial actions by supernatural means. And again, it all stems back to paganism and Catholic mysticism, where if you pronounce a certain incantation like the priest, you can make something or change something into that which it is not. Whether it's the wine and bread to the body and blood with an incantation, or God's blessings on his cursings with an incantation. Christmas, by the way, is thoroughly a Catholic and a pagan holiday. We'll see that in a moment. Leviticus chapter 19. Now, when we give the invitation here at the end of the next service, I have everybody to stand up and say, ho, 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 ho. So we all know the light in which this is given. Leviticus 19. And we'll start reading with verse 1. The Lord spake to Moses, saying, speaking to the congregation of the children of Israel, saying to them, Ye shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Now, the point that we're making here is that all God's feasts were holy. We'll take you to those in a moment. But, let me put the cue here. It required holy people. Before he gave them the feast, he's telling them, look here, I'm a holy God, and in order to keep these feasts, you have to be holy. You'll fear every man his father and mother. Keep my Sabbaths. I'm the Lord your God. Verse 4. Turn ye not to idols, nor make to yourselves molten gods. I'm the Lord your God. Idolaters were considered unholy. And you cannot keep a holy day without being holy. Otherwise, you're a what? We've talked about this before. That's hypocrisy. That is blatant hypocrisy. To come and celebrate Christmas when you have no intention of making the true and living God your actual God and his Son your Savior and Lord is hypocrisy. So what has the United States Congress done in making Christmas a national state holiday, a federal holiday? They have in effect made every unsaved person and carnal person a hypocrite, because you can't celebrate it unless you're holy. Leviticus chapter 23. Leviticus chapter 23. 12 times in this chapter the word holy is used. All of them are used when characterizing the feasts of Jehovah. By the way, Christmas is not in there. I just thought I'd throw that in. You can't find anywhere where it says celebrate Messiah's birthday. In the New Testament, you'll never find it. In fact, in the New Testament, you'll find Paul saying to the Gentiles who do not have a theocracy nationally, don't celebrate holy days. You cannot have a national holy day because the people that you're around are unholy. They're Gentiles. God made no covenant with them. But the reason Israel could have a national holy day was because of her covenants. God had a theocracy, and so they could do that. God could rightly require holy days. Verse 2, speak to the children of Israel and say unto them concerning the feast of Jehovah, which ye shall proclaim, note, to be holy convocations. Verse 4, these are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. Now, what we have done here, and I'm out of my time, I'll just make some comments, and this is where we'll start in the next hour. All of God's feasts are holy. But in order to participate in the feast, you had to have a holy people. That's why they constantly offered these sacrifices, to have the blood of the animals cover their sins so God would not judge them. Now, holiness means, kadosh, Hebrew, to be set apart unto God or compatible with his essence. How many people like that do you know that are your neighbors, even family members? In order for them to celebrate a holy day like Christmas, you need to tell them. Wouldn't it be appropriate if you and God were one? There's a way to do that. There's a way to be at one with his righteous essence, and that's to have his own righteousness imputed to you by faith in Christ. Otherwise, you're unholy and you're disqualified to celebrate Christmas unless you do one thing, and that's the upshot of this whole lesson. Unless you change Christmas, unless you corrupt Christmas to be compatible with your soul. You see, that's all you got to do is, I'm unholy, and here's a holy God, and he tells me to do it this way. But in order for me to be compatible and not feel like a hypocrite, I'll just change his holy day and make it like my heart is. I'll fashion him in the image I think he should be. So we're going to talk about that in just a little bit.